Hey y'all, if you are just joining my show for the first time, hi, my name is Janine. After 15 years of active addiction that was incredibly gnarly, that I thought would literally kill me in the end, I've now been sober since January 15th of 2015. In sobriety, I've gotten married. I opened and successfully sold a business, a fitness studio. I live in this beautiful home that I was able to just make this room a podcast studio. If you're watching on Spotify or if you're watching on YouTube, my life has changed. I didn't die a dope fiend, and I've dedicated my life to making sure that other people know that you can recover. Not only can you recover, you can have a full life and all the things that you wanted. And so this show is dedicated to sharing those stories. So this is my gnarliest, craziest jail story that I have never shared. World exclusive on chasing heroin. Let's back up to June of 2013. Evan, my ex, is the guy that I did most of my using with. Not all. The last year of my use, I did alone. He had left the state, and I continued to use alone. And that was an important time for me to look back and say, okay, I did bad all by myself. He wasn't even here for that, because for a long time I really blamed him and genuinely believed that if I hadn't met him, I never would have been a heroin addict. I used before, but I didn't do heroin, and I really always blamed him for that. But that year that he was gone, I continued using on my own, which was actually a very helpful realization to come to, because when we blame someone else for a problem, it actually makes us completely powerless over that problem. If I didn't create it, how can I solve it? And so for me, taking accountability over the issue is actually incredibly powerful. Saying, no, I am at fault for this, which means I can fix this. My behavioral patterns got me into this mess. I can alter my behavioral patterns in a way that get me out of this mess. So for me, it was actually really empowering to stop blaming him. However, most of the using I did was with him. And most of the criminal activity I did was with him. Of the 5 times I've been arrested, 4 of them, we got arrested together. And one of them, I was on the phone with him, actually. I was on my way home. We hadn't started dating yet. We were talking, and I was texting him, and I got pulled over, and I went to jail. Which, what do they say in AA? Ominous forebodings, or the ominous warnings. I went to jail and then I'd never have gotten arrested since he left, since I wasn't with him. So, lots of criminal activity together. So Evan and I, in June of 2013, had been living in an apartment in Oceanside, and we had decided to just use. We had both gone to rehab in 2012, and he was in a sober living, I was in a sober living. And I truly believed at that point in my use, when I went to rehab the first time, that I was not actually an addict, that I had accidentally gotten strung out on heroin. If you guys have been listening to the show for a while, you've heard me say this. I accidentally got strung out on heroin. All I needed was to just kick heroin, and I would be fine. For sure that's a problem. Okay. But I'm not an alcoholic. I can drink. I could probably even do coke. I definitely don't need to go to meetings or have a sponsor or do steps or any of that business. I just need to get off the heroin. And I really believed that. So I'm in rehab. He's in rehab. We're in sober living. He's in sober living. We both start using again with this idea that neither one of us is really a drug addict. Of course, we both end up strung out on heroin quickly. We both get kicked out of our sober livings in December of 2012. And I was actually thinking about it. I don't remember why we both got kicked out, but we both got kicked out on the same day. I had gotten arrested for a DV charge on him a few weeks prior. And I remember as I was getting kicked out, my house manager, Steve, was like, oh, you also got arrested. And he had my mugshot from my property bag. But it wasn't the reason I was getting kicked out. I'd probably just failed a drug test, I guess. So we both get kicked out. And he called a friend of his and said, hey, can we crash with you? He had a spare room, and he was like, we'll pay you this amount a month or whatever. Can we come stay with you? And this sweet man, I actually super owe this guy an amends, if I can remember his name. He said, sure, you guys can live with us, because he had used to work with Evan when Evan was doing great. Because Evan, like many addicts, is smart and was a hard worker and was fairly talented when he wasn't using. And so this guy knew Evan from then. We'll call him Carlos, but I don't remember his real name. But Carlos had worked with Evan. And so he thought of him as this regular nice guy that he used to work with. He had no idea what had been happening in the interim since the last time they'd spoken. So he lets us move in with him, and we proceed to wreck his life. Like, wreck his life. He took his son out of the second bedroom. The son was sleeping on like an air mattress in his room so that we could have a room. And I think we did pay him rent, but then it was just a nightmare. We were using in the house. You know, Evan was bringing people in and drugs in all day and all night. And that guy eventually he kicked us out after that first month of January. So he kicked us out, and I still remember where we were sitting. We were sitting at a Starbucks in Vista outside, and I'm panicking because we have no idea where we're going to go. We have no money. And I will always give him this. He thought of Wounded Warrior, which is a foundation or a charity, an organization that helps former U.S. military, especially if they're veterans of an overseas conflict, of a war, which Evan was, multiple. He contacted Wounded Warrior and said, my girlfriend and I have lost our place and we don't know where we're going to go. And that foundation, that organization, God bless them, immediately got us a hotel room. In fact, if you guys have ever heard me tell the story of my friend that drew the map and the cop was like, what is this? Is this the blueprints for a bank? That happens at the hotel they get us. We're there for like a month. So they get us a hotel while they are getting together money for a deposit and first month's rent for us. And then we're on our own. But they were gathering all of that because he was 100% disabled from a traumatic brain injury and something else. And so he got money from the VA. I think it was like $1,400 a month. And that was like coming. So they're waiting for him to finally get the money. And they put us in this hotel room. We stay in this hotel. You know, tons of shenanigans happen in the hotel, obviously. Like I said, that's when the cop showed up and searched the place. That's when they took the picture of me with the drop cloth, front, side, and then they just left. And we had no idea what happened. Side note, if you guys don't follow my Chasing Heroin Instagram, I posted this recently. A Vista sheriff, a retired Vista sheriff, which is the county that I'm in, has always taken my classes at Psycho Bar and then at Cybrid and now back at Psycho Bar. And she took my class for her 250th ride and we took a picture. And she told me that she had seen that picture of me. And what it was is they would circulate known criminals and degenerates in the area and say, our narcotics officers are constantly looking for these people. They're a fourth waiver. If you see them, pull them over. It was like a, not most wanted, but like a keep an eye on these idiots list. And she told me she had seen that picture of me and then saw me resurface at Psycho Bar and took my classes and was so proud of me. Isn't that crazy? I posted that on my Instagram if you want to go back and look at that picture. She's like the sweetest woman and joined Cybrid. And I didn't really know why because she kind of showed up out of nowhere. That was why. Anyways, so shenanigans happen in that hotel and they do eventually actually get us an apartment in Oceanside. And I remember it was $850 a month. And like I said, he got that $1,400 and they paid the deposit and the first month's rent. And his name was on the lease, though, which is important because Evan was a fourth waiver and I was not. And I've had so many people ask me what a fourth waiver is. And I think I take it for granted that that's not everywhere, that might just be a California thing. So a fourth waiver means you have waived your Fourth Amendment right to decline search and seizure. And so sometimes when you get arrested and you're sentenced, you can knock down your sentencing from a felony or a misdemeanor or from served time to probation if you agree to be a fourth waiver, which means any cop anywhere at any time can stop, pull over, and say, show me your bags, what's on you. They can pat you down. You no longer have the constitutional right of declining a search or seizure. And everybody in this area signs for a fourth waiver if you get the option. And even as I explain it, it's like, wow, that's actually pretty serious to like voluntarily give up one of your constitutional rights. But it's not forever. It's also like 3 years. Like there's some sort of probationary, time attached to it. I was actually supposed to be a fourth waiver. I pled to being a fourth waiver, but in another like weird, bizarre turn of my luck that I experienced as an addict, there's a box on, if any of you guys have ever been arrested or anything you go to, there's like the paper that's one is pink, one is yellow, one is white, the carbon copies. There's a carbon copy and they write the arresting officer's name when you go to court, your name and then whatever the sentencing is. There's a box that you check if suspect agrees to be a fourth waiver, if you plead to be a fourth waiver. I agreed to it and pled to it. and they didn't check the box. So I was not ever a fourth waiver, though I had agreed to be one. However, he was. Lease is in his name because he was the veteran. Wounded Warrior is helping us. So lease is in his name. We're living in this place in Oceanside. And in June, we paid rent late for the first and only time. So, and I was thinking about this morning when I was preparing to tell this story. This is like a convoluted chain of events, but basically he owed all these money to Check Cash Place. And so the moment money hit, they would get their money within that day or within a few hours. But he would go to the ATM midnight on the 1st, and starting at midnight and then every literally 3 minutes, he would stick his card in, check the balance, and if he got his $1,400, pull it all out. Check the balance, blah, blah, blah. And so he had successfully done this every month that we were there, and we got enough to pay the rent, and then the rest we'd spend on dope, and then the rest of the month we would hustle for dope money together, right? And this is when I really got into like, you know, just the common junkie hustles, returning stuff at Home Depot, returning stuff at Walmart, selling things that you stole or found or whatever, selling perfumes, you know, all the things that we do. We had an EBT card. Sometimes we would trade the balance of that, you know, all the junkie hustles. So we had some money at the first, and then the rest of the month we spent hustling. May 31st, and again, the details of this, I don't quite remember, but we had this chick that hung out with us. Her name's Rosie. And that's her actual name because I doubt she'll ever hear this, but she might. Hi, Rosie. So this chick, Rosie, stayed with us sometimes. She was a junkie too, because there's a lot of benefit to being like the one group of addicts or the one addict that actually has a place. We were talking about this in Kevin's episode a few weeks ago. He always had a place. And if you have a place, that gives you a lot of leverage with other addicts and connects, because people need a place to go, right? At this level of addiction, most people are homeless, right? And, you know, we had been, except for this, you know, unbelievable luck that he thought to call this, you know, organization, and he was a veteran. So people can come stay with you, and then as a trade, they have to like bring you dope or do this or do you favors or get stuff. The place that you have to live in becomes a commodity of trade amongst addicts. And we actually lived right next to a casino too, Ocean's 11 Casino. And one of our meth connects loved to gamble. And so it was like so great for us if he'd go on a gambling streak for a few days, because he would want to stay with us and just cross the street to the casino and then just like feed us meth, you know, to let him stay there. So having this place afforded us the safety of being indoors. It afforded us the safety of being able to shoot dope, right? Because, you know, you got to like find a vein. And when you're homeless and you're trying to find a vein in bathrooms and people kind of know what you're doing because they know what you know, because you look like an addict, it afforded us a place to be able to like, you know, shoot, and the safety of having a place. You know, we could run back to it. We could store stuff there that we sold while we were doing trades, whatever. And again, we could really leverage it with other addicts and connects. So we have this place. And one of the addicts that would stay with us sometimes was this girl, Rosie, and she was scandalous. She was a scandalous girl. And on May 31st, she showed up in a brand new Jeep Wrangler, like a 2013 or 14 even Wrangler, dealer plates, dealer tags, and claimed that she had stolen it off the lot in Chula Vista. And at the time I believed her. Looking back though, it seems super shady, but I don't know why she would have made it up. She wasn't trying to like sell it to us or anything. So I don't know. But she claimed that she was walking by the lot in Chula Vista, which Chula Vista is very far away from here. It's like an hour away from where we were. Walking around, tried the doors of this dealership. They were unlocked. She walked into the dealership and she said there were a bunch of keys behind the desk because they let you test drive cars. And she grabbed one and chirp, 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 walked around the parking lot until she found it and just drove it off the lot and just Grand Theft Auto, well, larceny on a Thursday morning and drove it to our house. So she drives it to our house. And a car is another thing that you can really leverage as an addict. If you actually have a car and you can get to the connect or you can get people to trade things, like it's also one of those things that you can really leverage. We didn't have a car. We hadn't in forever. So she had this car and we all three went to an In-N-Out parking lot to buy some dope. And it's getting closer to midnight and I know he needs to go pull the money out for our rent, right? And y'all know how it is. The Connect, of course, is late. We end up being in that parking lot until 3 in the morning. And by the time we get back and he checks his balance, the whole check has been taken to Check Cash Loans. It's gone. And we didn't pay rent yet. So on the 5th or the 6th, like really early, they served us eviction papers from the apartment, which looking back, I kind of had this idea to fight it, and I'll get into that, but I ended up changing my mind once we got to court. But I thought about fighting it because we had never paid late before, and we were on a lease, and it was only like the 5th or the 6th, and we'd never been late before. But they, of course, knew what we were doing. We had people in and out all the time. We smoked in there, and you weren't supposed to. You could smell it all the time. I remember one time I was out like on the balcony with my computer trying to hijack the Wi-Fi of one of our neighbors, just out there with an extension cord from our house and all the way down through. We had a patio that circled a pool like on Melrose Place, and all the apartments faced in. And so I've got an extension cord running from our room all the way to the corner of the hallway. People are walking by with their groceries, like stepping over it, just literally trying to hack someone's Wi-Fi and like get their password somehow. We had the turtles too. This is when we had the turtles. And so Evan had built their enclosure with like saws. He cut out the inside of speakers, and, you know, like we were a mess, and it was obvious we were addicts. And I'm sure that's why they tried to evict us. But legally, like, I don't even know if you can, but whatever, they do. And I had the option to go to court over it, and I took that option. So a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, we have court, and we had another chick that lived with us as well, who would stay with us, her and her boyfriend, again, because if you have shelter, you can super leverage that as an addict. And she had a good little hustle. She had a good check cash hustle going on, and so did the dude. And so she would give us money to stay there. She would even actually like clean the house and stuff. And she was only a meth addict. She wasn't a heroin addict. So she wasn't going to like steal any of our stuff. She wasn't always worried about, you know, getting well. And so she would stay with us from time to time too. This is also when I had started also making checks through her, and her boyfriend at the time showed me how to do it. So I'm sure you guys could just Google it, but you have to get magnetic ink. And as long as you have routing and accounting numbers, you can print your own check. And I was doing that. I was printing my own checks, and I was making them to a name that I had a fake ID of. And earlier that year, so now this is June, in February maybe, I made one to my name because I didn't have a fake ID that day, and we were sick. And I thought, whatever, if the person gave me a fake check, like say I taught a private yoga class for someone at their home and they wrote me a check, how would I know? That's not my fault if it's a bad check, right? Was my thinking. So though I knew it wasn't brilliant, I just wrote a check in my own name in January, February, and cashed it at a liquor store in Vista. And I thought, well, if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen soon. Nothing ever happens. Now we're June. By then, I'm making checks more often, and I'm making them to fake IDs, right? I had one fake ID in particular. The chick kind of looked like me, and I would make it to me, and I would change the company name each time. Do y'all remember there used to be jewelry parties? There might still be jewelry parties, but someone would sell like Alex and Annie jewelry or something else, and they would have a little jewelry party. We used to do them at the bar studio. One of the members would sell jewelry. It's like a little multi-MLM business, and they would sell jewelry. And so I would find those names and write checks to me like I had sold some jewelry for one of these like MLMs. I would say that it was someone that I had met at a bar studio and I was helping them. And I don't know, did they give me a fake check? I don't know, like whatever. But again, if it's the fake ID, hoping it never comes back to me. So we're doing the fake checks. There's tons of stolen stuff at the house. He's dabbling in guns a little as well, stealing guns and stuff. So there's weapons in the house. Sometimes we would bury them outside in a sea bag, a marine sea bag. Sometimes they would be in the house. We had electronics, like, it's just a walking, several felonies in there. So we get evicted, and I decide to try to fight it. And the girl that lived with us, not Rosie, the one with the Jeep, the other one, who's my friend. The guy that taught me how to do the fake checks, I definitely don't want to use his real name. Let's call him Rich. Rich had a car. And let's call her Ziva. Also, I love that name from NCIS. So, Rich and Ziva staying with us, teaching us how to make checks. Rich has a car. So, he agrees to take us to court. So, Evan and I go to court, and I have no fears at all about getting arrested because it's for a civil thing. It's for the eviction. It's not for a charge. But still, I didn't bring any dope with me, right? I just had my purse and wallet, no rigs. He doesn't bring anything with him. And those two weren't going inside. So they bring us to court, and we're waiting to go in and see the judge. And the apartment complex lawyer walks up to me and is like, look, you seem like a nice girl. I'm going to be honest with you. It's pretty clear what's happening here. You know, I hope you get well. I hope that you get help, and the help that you clearly need. But you're not going to win this argument today. And you're going to be embarrassed. So I tell you what, if you just agree to leave, the apartment complex will not put this eviction on y'all's credit report. Because though the lease was in both of our name, right? Like he had to be on it because of the Wounded Warrior, but I was on it also. So he said this is going to go on both of y'all's credit, but it doesn't have to. And, you know, again, I probably could have argued, but I'm also a drug addict, 32. I was embarrassed. You know, he wasn't wrong. So I agree to just will leave. And by the way, they put it on our record anyways. Isn't it shitty? The guy just lied to me. They did put it on our record. But anyway, and an eviction is like not good for your credit. But so we sign, we leave, we get in the car to head back to our house. Rich is driving. Ziva is sitting in the middle. I'm in shotgun. Evan's in the back seat. And next to him is a bunch of shit, right? Because they're tweakers. So there's like a lamp and a VCR, like, you know, a DVD player and a flashlight and just like random tweaker stuff. I remember he was like squished up next to the window like this because there's just tweaker stuff everywhere. So we're on the way home. I have no dope on me. Evan has no dope on him. These two are always using, whatever. We're driving and we're passing a meth pipe around from the three of us to him in the back, you know, windows open, just hitting the meth pipe. And as we're turning onto the freeway, if you are familiar with the area, we're turning onto the 78, all of a sudden, we get lit up. So Rich pulls over and he was holding the meth pipe that had a pretty fully packed bowl. And I don't want to trigger anybody here, but you know, it gets liquidy when you smoke and then it hardens when you don't. So it was like fairly full liquidy. And he's holding the meth pipe. And he had been in a lot of trouble in his lifetime. He'd been to prison multiple times. I think he was on parole at this moment. And he just hands it to Ziva, his girlfriend, and is like, I can't have this on me. You need to take this. So she takes it and is like, I can't have this either. And then she sets it between me and her, just visible in the front seat. And I can see the cop walking up to the car. You know, he's probably, I don't know, 15 feet away. And the meth pipe is just out. It's not even hidden. It's just sitting there. And fortunately, it has cooled somewhat because they can get pretty hot. And I wasn't totally thinking this at the moment, but I did think it later. I don't have anything on me, right? Because I just gone to court. So I know I'm going home. I don't know what's going to happen to these two idiots. But me and Evan are going home, right? Like I don't have anything on me. I don't have any warrants, whatever. So I pick up the bowl and I had court clothes. I had one pair of like court pants, which were from Express. And I'd had them forever. And they were like pretty huge on me now because I'm a strung out junkie. But it was like these high-waisted gray like business pants from the early 2000s, these Express pants. And they were my court pants. And they were kind of big. So I grabbed the bowl, the pipe, and I put it just resting inside the pants, like on my hip crease. Because again, I don't think anything's happening, right? I was just at court. I'm on my way home. I don't have anything on me. Cop walks up, my side and Rich's side. And Rich is on parole. And they ask us all for our names. We all have records. And so they say, all right, all four of you guys, you know how it is. If you've ever had police contact of some sort, it's always, all right, let's just everybody step out of the vehicle till we can figure out what's going on. Just everybody, just for everyone's safety, let's go ahead and step out. We're going to separate you guys. Get your hands behind your back, just for everyone's safety, blah, blah, blah. So we get up, and there was two male cops. And so they patted all four of us down. But on me, they did a pretty light pat, like just from this, because I think there's laws about what they can do until they have a female officer present. So they just do a pat on the outside, pat on the inside. And the bowl is just like resting on my hip crease, like right there. So they put everybody down. And I think they even put us in handcuffs while we were sitting there. They certainly told us to put our hands behind our back. I'm pretty sure they put us in handcuffs just off the rip, right? And again, Evan is a fourth waiver, so they can put him in handcuffs. And I'd bet money Ziva and Rich were fourth waivers too, and I just don't remember. So we're all in handcuffs. We're all sitting there, and I'm looking at her like, oh my God, like the meth pipe is on me. But I'm mostly okay because I know I'm going home. So they start going through the car. They start going through everything. And I don't remember what Ziva had on her, something that was enough to get her arrested. And it turns out the car we were in was stolen, of course. So Rich was driving a stolen car while he was on parole. He ends up getting extradited back to Miami after this because he had stolen a car there, and he did like 7 years from this day on. So, but anyways, so we're sitting there, and they go through my wallet, and I had completely forgotten about this. I had Subutex in a cigarette cellophane in the coin part of my purse, like buried underneath all the coins. And I've shared this before. I always was trying to kick. And so I would often have Suboxone or Subutex on me because I was always trying to kick. And then it wouldn't. And so it would just end up like being a charge because it was on me. So I had Subutex, which I forgot about. And that fake ID that I was using for checks was behind my real ID. So they find the fake, they find the Subutex, and then Evan, for some reason, had a butterfly knife in his pocket that I guess he had taken out when we walked into court and then put it back in his pocket. And he was not supposed to have any weapons of any kind as terms of conditions of his parole, probation, whatever. So he's got this butterfly knife that he's not supposed to have. So they arrest all four of us. They take all four of us to jail right then. I still have the meth pipe sitting on my leg. So they put me and Ziva in a separate car, and they put Rich and Evan in a separate car and take us to jail, them to jail. So we're in the back of the cop car, and I am just looking at her like, oh my gosh, this meth pipe is in my pants. And I'm trying to telecommunicate to her like, basically fuck, because it's not like she can do anything to help me. But I was so mad that it was their pipe and they didn't even take the charge. The dude is passing it to us. So my hands are behind me. I'm handcuffed. Now remember, these pants are kind of loose on me, right? So we're headed to jail. By the way, for my non-addict listeners, bringing dope into jail or paraphernalia is a massive felony because the assumption is you're getting it to someone on the inside, and the whole prison drug trade is based on people's willingness to do stuff like this. Take a charge, get to jail, start to bring it in through the ranks, la, 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 la. It's like a really big deal. So we're in the car. My hands are handcuffed behind my back. And I managed to get my hands into the back of my pants. And I lift up and kind of shimmy. If you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, I'm demonstrating what I did. The pipe shifts, moves down, and Ziva's just staring at me wide-eyed. And of course, the cop is like, quit fucking moving around back there, of course. And I'm like, I have to pee. Get up, and I get the meth pipe to shift under me, bowl down, stem up. And you can probably see where this is going. Bowl down, stem up, I lift up as high as I can. I'm holding my hands and I'm able to kind of hold it with my hands because the pants were huge. And I slide down onto it, putting it up inside me like a tampon. This whole meth pipe with a half a packed bolt that now, thank God, has hardened. Pipe goes up me. I'm also thinking I'm going to bail out because I've always been able to bail out. This is my 4th arrest and I bailed out. So I'm thinking, okay, if I can just get it in me, like I'm going to be bailing out tonight, right? And they don't search you on the way into holding. Not really. So we get to jail. But before they take us to jail to learn what like your bail is, we go downstairs into like the reception area and you're handcuffed to a thing while they like type stuff in. And we're there forever. I mean, hours. Evan and I are starting to get sick. They aren't. And I remember Rich had a bunch of needles in his pants. And I remember him throwing them across the room. And there was just the 4 of us in there. And at one point, one of the cops came in and there was like 4 rigs in the corner of the jail. And he was like, y'all know there's a camera right there, right? Which one of you guys did this? And in that moment, Rich actually raised his hand. I don't even know if he was in so much trouble. It didn't even matter. But so we're there forever. And I assume it's because of him. I mean, again, he's like a big time criminal, right? So I'm like, God, what did this guy do? Did he like murder somebody? And like I just need to get to holding and bail us out. I'm going to call Tom at Wizard Bail Bonds. He's the guy I always use, whatever. So after hours, they bring me into a questioning room. And they have found that check I wrote in February to myself. And he says, is this you? And I tried to hold to my story of, yeah, totally. This was written to me. I now know that if I had just denied it, I would have gotten away with it. But I thought it was better to say, yeah, that check was written to me. What I didn't know was that Rich, who had told me about the check cash scandal, he was using the same company as me on a bunch of other checks too. So they tied us together that this guy that was in my car, who's a known criminal, and me are both getting paid by the same MLM jewelry company. What are the odds of that? Obviously, these are fake checks, and I totally confessed to just cashing one. So I say, yeah, that's me. I got paid for jewelry service. And I didn't know yet any of this. I didn't know until later. They made me and Rich co-defendants on a case. And so when I was seeing the discovery, months later, I was like, that idiot. So anyways, I say, yeah, that's me. So they bring me back, and it turns out that all of that time was checking my background. And then also they searched our house because Evan is a 4th waiver. So they also searched our place while we were there. And they found my printer with special ink for the checks. They found dope. They found, whatever was in the place. We still don't know any of this. So they get us to holding. I've got the pipe in me. And I remember Ziva wanted me to like take it out because there was another girl in there that actually had a lighter. And Ziva was like, let's hit that. And she told the other chick that I had this. And they were like, come on. But holding is small. In the local jail here, it's just the size, it's a little bit bigger than this room, but there's a giant window and there are bailiffs right there. But more than that, by then I'm like dope sick and like passing out. So I fall asleep and I start calling anyone I can think of to bail me out. And this is the most desperate I've ever been in jail. So my mom was visiting my brother at the time, and she wasn't answering me. She knew I was calling from jail and wasn't answering me. And she had bailed me out the last time. My last arrest was in December for a DV. She bailed me out on that. She bailed me out on the DUI. The second charge, I bailed myself out. But I'd always been able to bail out. And if you can't bail out, what that means is you go to like jail, right? You leave holding and you go to the real jail. And I was really scared to go to the real jail. And I think that anybody that says that they aren't scared to go to jail is lying. Like, come on. You hear horror stories, you see crazy things on TV. Like, I was scared to go to jail. Plus, I have this meth pipe inside me. So I even called my dad, which I can't believe I did. I had never called my dad before when I got arrested. I'm feeding him this whole line about how I got tricked with this check. I'm innocent. And he's not going to bail me out. I even called my uncle, Cliff, who I adore, who is also wrapped up in my strong arm robbery case because I got arrested on his birthday, actually. That's a whole other thing if you want to go back and listen to that episode. But I called my uncle, and I was super manipulative. My nickname as a kid was Buckethead from my dad. And I was like, hey, Uncle Cliff, it's Buckethead. No one's called me this in years. I'm a 32-year-old junkie. They don't even answer. Hours are passing, and it becomes clear to me that I'm going to have to go to the women's jail down in San Diego with a meth pipe inside me. So finally, after, I don't know, they give you a while. After like 20 hours, they're like, Coulter, dress out, you're going. I'm like, fuck. So dress out means that you take off your regular clothes and you have to put on jail stuff, which in a way is good because jail is freezing and they at least give you sweats. But so I go to change and they strip search you. So I take off all my clothes and she says, turn around, spread and cough. Spread and cough. That's a real thing. They make you do that. And again, if you're watching the video, I can show you what I did. So I turn around and I did this like baby, like, and stand up. And she's like, come on, Coulter, for real. And so I turn around, go like this, and I'm like, and sure enough, it starts to shoot out. And right as I cough, I stand up, she's behind me, I stand up and push it back inside and turn around to look at her. And I'm like, can I get dressed now? I'm freezing. And she was like, sure, whatever. And she goes back to her paperwork. So it did start to like shoot out and I push it back inside. So I get dressed, get on the bus. Now I'm sick, right? I stayed another night. They move you to another little cell. The next morning they bus us down to the jail. I'm handcuffed to some chick and I go to regular jail for the first time, which was terrifying. So they bring me into Las Colinas and San Diego is like these big dorms. So there's two sides to the dorm and then there's bathrooms in the middle. And I even remember it was the N unit was mine. So they bring us there, show me my bunk. And they did give me a bottom bunk because I'm on Librium because I was so sick, like kicking. And so Librium can cause all sorts of problems. So I have a bottom bunk. They show me my bunk. I still have a pipe inside me. But now I'm like dumb dope sick, right? I've been shooting dope, shooting meth and heroin every day for a long time. And it's been, 2 days or whatever without any dope at this point. I'm crazy sick. So I lay down, pass out. That night, there's someone snoring like so loud in the dorm. And I had actually finally fallen asleep. And so I start screaming in the dorm. I'm like, shut up, quit snoring. And I can't believe I didn't get my ass beat that night. But I'm like, shut up, stop snoring. And they wouldn't. So I finally dragged my little mat that was on my cot through the bathroom to the other dorms. And there was an empty bunk, like just a metal bed frame. Threw my mat down, slept there. At some point the next day, I made way back and passed out again. And the next thing I know, I'm being woken up by someone. And I wake up and this large woman was sitting on my bed. And she was like, get up, shaking me. It was another person staying there. It was another inmate. And I opened my eyes and this large lady is sitting on my bunk. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to get like SA'd here? Like, is this real, And she said, you ever been to jail before? And I said, no, ma'am. And she said, okay, so we've got some rules in here that you need to know. Were you over here yelling last night at someone snoring? Were you over here screaming? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, okay, you can't do that. It's jail. People are going to snore. You can't be over here screaming. Did you move your mat to the other side, to the other dorm? And I said, yes, ma'am, I did. And she said, okay, well, you can't do that either. This is your side. This is your house, your pod. This is our house. Can't move into the middle of the night. And I said, okay. And she said, also, are you getting naked over here? And I was. I had taken off my jail nightgown because I was sweating, I guess. So I was laying there naked. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, okay, you can't do that either. There's girlfriends in here. And if you're over here getting naked, it's going to cause a real problem. You can't take your clothes off. And I said, okay. And she said, also, have you showered or washed your hair or brushed your teeth since you got here? And I said, no, ma'am, I have not. And she said, okay. So my rule on this side is you have to shower, wash your hair, and brush your teeth every single day. Do you understand? And I said, yes, ma'am, I understand. And she said, okay, now, you're naked right now, aren't you? And I said, yes, I am. And she was like, all right, let me help you out. And she held something up. I don't even remember what. And she said, get dressed. And so I grabbed my little nightgown and put it on. And she showed me how you fold the mat under as a pillow because they don't give you a pillow. And then right before she walked away, she handed me 2 plastic things, like a grocery bag, plastic with like white stuff inside. And she handed them to me. And I thought it was sugar because she had also asked in the very beginning of the conversation what I was kicking. And I said heroin. And so I thought she was like giving me sugar because I've never experienced that like sugar can help you kick, but that's like a rumor. That's like a thing people say. So I thought she was giving me sugar. And so I'm laying there and I was like, oh, thank you. And I pulled some out. Like there was a part where the plastic was open. And I was like, thanks. And I pulled some and I put it in my mouth. And she stood up and she was like, bitch, what's you doing? And I said, it's sugar, right? And she was like, bitch, those are earplugs. And then just walked away. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then the next few days, I do remember going to chow a couple of times. You have to have your hands in your pants when you walk in the waistband. And I remember them being like, Coulter, open your eyes. And I did get up and shower. You have to stick a spoon in the thing for it to run. And I made a tragic mistake, which was I sat down on the shower floor while I was in the shower. And that is how I got this scar on my face that I complain about all the time because I got impetigo from that moment. Anyways, sit down. And while I was in the shower that time, I got the meth pipe out, stepped out of the shower. No one was around. Walked over to the trash can, lifted up a bunch of paper towels, buried it in the trash. Got away with it. No one ever found it. Looking back, I probably should have given it to her. Somebody might have wanted it, but again, I'm dog ass sick. I have no idea what's happening. It's also probably a good thing I didn't do that, So anyways, bury the meth pipe. On, I think, my 3rd day there, I'm laying down, and I remember one of the bailiffs came in and was like, Coulter, roll up. And I said, what? And she was like, roll up. And someone said, that means you got bail. And I was like, what? Someone bailed me out? Also, y'all have to bear in mind, I'm wearing glasses with one lens. This was those days. My hair is insane because my hair is kind of crazy anyways. It looks awful anyways. I just can afford straighteners and stuff. Hair's insane. Can barely talk sick. Wasn't showering, yelling at people like crazy. And I get bail. And I remember walking out and every girl in that pod was just staring at me. And I remember saying on my way out, I was like, oh, I know who bailed me out. My man bailed me out as I was walking out. And I heard someone say, this is not my language, this is someone else's language. I heard someone say, that bitch has a boyfriend? I thought she was retarded. And I heard someone say that as I was walking out. Again, not my language, not something I would say. So Evan had bailed me out. Evan had been released after 3 days. I was actually talking to Skylar about this, why that would have happened, because he didn't make bail, but he got released. And Skylar was saying maybe they were trying to watch him because of the guns, which I'm sure is true. Because one of the other things that happened while I was there, after I got the meth pipe out, was I got called into an interrogation room and they handcuffed me to the side. Also, we had these turtles, and I've never talked about the turtles yet on the podcast, I don't think. It's a whole long story. But we had Russian tortoises named Tupac and Biggie, and I loved our tortoises. I loved our turtles. And they have really special conditions that have to be met for them to like be healthy. And so one side of the enclosure has to be a certain temperature. The other side has to be a certain temperature. They have to have special rocks. They can only eat certain things. Kind of like Tank, actually. Maybe I like taking care of these weird animals. Tank, like, you know, he can't live without human intervention. So I had these tortoises. I get pulled into an interrogation room. I'm handcuffed. And they come in. It's two men in suits. And the guy said, and I remember they were in suits because he said, Ms. Coulter, I need you to understand something. I'm not your lawyer. I'm a detective. And I guess they have to tell you that. And so I'm sitting there and they were asking me questions about guns and Evan. And I didn't know anything about that, which he did on purpose. A lot of stuff he did I didn't know anything about. Like he would leave in the middle of the night to go do things. I had some idea of what it was. And he would bring stuff back for me to try to like sell or whatever. But like I didn't know where he was going or where he was getting things, no idea. And I didn't know anything about the guns. And so they're asking me, they wanted to search a storage unit and the storage unit was in my name. Like, could they search it? All this stuff. And I'm like so out of it. I can't even follow them. I'm not talking. And all I kept saying over and over again was, what about my turtles? My turtles are alone. My turtles are alone. And finally, one of the detectives like took pity on me. And he said, because at some point in this conversation, I also learned that they had searched our place. Because he said, now we found a printer in there with some interesting ink. Is that yours? Stuff like that. And I said, my turtles, are they okay? Were they okay? And finally, he says, you had some grapes in the fridge. So we fed them some grapes. But tortoises can't eat fruit because the sugar gases can kill them. And so I just said, grapes. And in the discovery, it's like suspect shrieks, grapes. And then it says, interview over. They just like brought me back to the pod. I had no information. I was absolutely worthless. Obviously not. I told him anything anyways. Like, fuck. So I get out. So and I'll never forget, this was like for those of you that have had these Bonnie and Clyde junkie relationships, this was a moment where he was like my knight in shining armor. So I get my clothes back on and I go out into like the yard at Las Colinas out front. And I see Evan standing there, his bald-headed glory with a wife beater on and you know, his sunglasses. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have never been more in love with this man in my life. I can't believe he bailed me out because my bail was also $45,000. Side note, if you go back and listen to the episode with Gumpy, this is when I called him too. So I'm like, jump into his arms, and I'm sure it was disgusting. But he said, all right, let's go home. And I remember getting into the back seat of a guy he used to work with, a guy that's like a straight guy. We're actually still friends on Facebook, me and this dude, Adrian. I don't think he'd even care if I said his name. He's like been pulling for me the whole time. And he's told me since then it was like the worst he's ever seen a human being look. He couldn't even believe that was me. So we get in the car and I'm not thinking, I'm like, hey, can I get well? Did you bring anything? And I remember Evan was like, shh, you know, because like Adrian wasn't supposed to know. So he brings us back and as soon as we get back, I'm like, so what about the guys? Which is what we called the tortoises. And Evan said, dude, I don't know how to tell you this. Like, they're gone. I'm like, what do you mean they're gone? And he said, they're not there. They're not in the house. Everybody's been through our place. Because that's the other thing that happens. Like, we were both gone and the cops don't lock the door behind them. So all of our friends, in quotes, were going into the place. I did have some nice jewelry from when I had worked at a boutique in Venice, took my stuff. I had some really cute jeans from when I worked at a boutique in La Jolla, Red Engine jeans, took that. And maybe they took the turtles. Like, we didn't really know. So we get home and one of us checks the mail, and there was a letter from the Humane Society. They had confiscated the turtles and brought them to the Humane Society. And to get them back, I had to go to like a little court case. It was like CPS for turtles. I had to go to the Humane Society and they asked me questions like, what's their enclosure supposed to be? How do you keep their beak trimmed, their nails trimmed? Like, they were asking me questions to make sure that I was a fit turtle parent. And I did actually get them back a few weeks from now. So that's where they were. So we get back to the house and we're still evicted too. So we, of course, stay until the sheriff shows up a few weeks later, whenever that happens. And they make you leave right then. And we went back and we tried to get what we could later, but, we just walked away from a whole house of stuff. The sheriff like escorts you out. And we walked out, went to the payphone, and, from there, obviously we have a very bad few months, right? Like, because now we don't even have a car. We have no money. We're both out on bail on these charges. They charged me with the checks and everything else. It's actually the only conviction I still have is that whole case. So we're out and we somehow got to my mother's neighborhood. I had a broken down Jeep in her driveway that I had dreams of fixing. And we broke into the Jeep. We spent the night in the Jeep a couple of nights until my stepdad saw us, and just fully homeless. This is when we lived in the beach house. Some of you guys have heard the beach mansion story when I ran out because I thought I saw the cops and they weren't there, and he found me on the tricycle. This is then. All of this starts happening now. So, as I said in the very beginning of the episode, I always try to share with these stories something relevant to our lives now, my life, your life, because I truly believe that stories like that gift us with these unbelievable life lessons and skills for later. And I was thinking about it. The main concern I had during that whole crazy event from start to finish was not the check case coming, not the meth pipe. Side note, Evan asked me if I still had it. He knew. And I'm like, you would have smoked it? It's been in my vag for like 4 fucking days. But like, who am I kidding? I would have smoked it too. So anyways, I'm above it. I'm not. So my main concern, the biggest fear at the time, was that we lost our place. We only got in because Wounded Warriors was helping us. Like, we don't have money for a deposit. We certainly can't get an apartment based on like our credit. Neither one of us are working. We haven't been working for a while. We look awful. And that was when we truly lost shelter. And we're dirty. We can't go to sober livings. This was during the time when, both of our families were like, y'all are on your own, whatever. We're never helping you guys again, whatever. Like, fully no shelter. And I was so devastated that we had lost that apartment because we could afford it, right? He got that money every month and it was within the budget that we had. And it was in like kind of a crappy part of town. We could kind of skitter around like crackheads and come and go. And I was just so terrified and distraught that we lost that apartment. And so what I want to talk about today is the idea that rejection is protection. That if we have a job and we get fired, or we want a promotion or we want a job and we don't get it, or the relationship doesn't work out, or some dream we have does not come to fruition, we don't get into the school we wanted to get into, that rejection is actually protection. And I want all of us together to try to have that shift in perspective, because I love what my friend Kevin said a few weeks ago, that a miracle is a shift in perspective, that's what a miracle is. Because think about that, shifting from I'm not an addict, I just got strung out, to man, I'm not only am I an addict, I'm like one of the bad ones, like on the scale of the disease, like mine is really bad, I need to go all in on recovery. Like that shift is a miracle. The fact that I'm willing to sit here under the brand Chasing Heroin and share my story when I was so ashamed, that is an actual miracle. Those shifts in perspective are an actual miracle. For you to be listening to this and believing I'm an addict as well, I'm in recovery, I'm learning from this, I need to always be learning. Think about what a miracle that is for you too. What a beneficial miracle that is. I just love that idea that shift in perspective is a miracle. And I got to thinking what a miracle it could be to really believe that any rejection is protection. Because I'm sure think about one of like the older junkies that you knew. There was always one older junkie that was in their like 60s, and they had some family money or Social Security, and they had a little place in like not a nice area, but they had a little place. It was like, $800 a month or whatever. And their family maybe had just given up on them because they've been using for so long. So the family gave them $500 a month, and then maybe they get Social Security and they're on the methadone clinic, but they try to use every day. And they're actually like living as an active addict day in and day out. And they've got weird shit in their house. There was one lady that I used to go see. She lived down in Cardiff, and she had Princess Diana dolls everywhere. And she was from like a really wealthy family, and she was like 66 or 67. And I remember she would try to hit and have to muscle it. And she wasn't desperate like me. She wasn't desperate like us, because she had her little amount that she knew she could use every day. And she had her SSI and maybe some family money. And she never left the apartment. And because she could leverage the apartment, me and my buddy, my main connect, we'd go see her, and he'd bring her dope because we could stay there and we could hit. And she just lived there with some Beatles memorabilia and some old Princess Diana stuff. Her life was so small. She's probably still there. I mean, if she has an overdose, she probably still lives there. That woman had dreams. Like, even though I'm kind of making fun of it that she had the Princess Diana memorabilia, she was like into something. Maybe she wanted to go to England. She might be really into the royal family, and the Beatles. For all I know, she was like a musician at one point. I don't know. But her life had gotten completely condensed into this apartment that was manageable and allowed her to live out her days as a full-blown junkie. So the ceiling on her life was like here, right? If I'd been able to stay in that apartment for years, and it was manageable for us to be there, the ceiling on our life would have stayed here. If my use could have continued to be comfortable, and he was getting way more money in a few months because he was getting back pay on his disability. If we'd been able to just stay there, pay the rent on time, keep our head down, what I thought at that time was such a gift of that place would have kept my life tiny. I never would have taught again. I wouldn't be here with you guys. So losing that place, though that ended abruptly and violently, thank God, that was my last few months on the street. My recovery journey takes 18 months, right? From here on, in and out, in and out, in and out. But when I finally made it back to Choices, I was so grateful to be there. And there was no doubt in my mind that I was a full-blown addict. It was not just the heroin. And I desperately needed some solution, and I was willing to do anything. Get a sponsor, go to meetings. I was desperate to get back to Choices. I begged my mom, please, one last time. And I was so happy to be there. I was so happy to see Steve. That is not how I felt the first time. And if I'd been able to stay in that apartment, I never would have gotten desperate. Like that old junkie lady down in Cardiff is not desperate. Why would you be? And then I got to thinking how often rejection is protection in all of our lives. And I want you guys to really mull this over with me. My business that I ended up owning, 3 years in or so, the two owners wanted to make me a third co-owner on it. Dream come true. And add me to the LLC and everything. But the terms just weren't good. They were kind of trying to get over on me. The terms weren't good. And I passed. But I was devastated to pass, right? Devastated. And I remember crying for months and saying that was my opportunity to be a business owner. And I lost it, I was so depressed for months after that. And of course, we all know what ended up happening. I ended up owning it on my own and being able to rebrand it and make it way better and really make it mine. And I did make it way better and way more successful than it had been. But even more than that, they got into some serious legal trouble later. And if I'd been on that LLC, I would have been at risk for that too. That rejection was protection. I want you guys to ask yourself, when was rejection protection? Or with relationships. There have been people that I really desperately wanted to be with. And thank God I didn't end up with them. I was waiting to meet Skylar, who's my perfect match, right? It would have kept me small. And so sometimes those things that we think are keeping us safe are actually keeping us small. And the reason I'm leaning into this so much is for twofold. One, I want to be able to have faith in that idea now, because I'll be honest, I still really struggle with the idea of my studio and giving up Cybrid. I mean, I still think about it every single day. Was that my legacy? Did I give up my own legacy? Like when I interviewed Khalil and he has that organics business, that's his legacy. And he has been able to leverage that into so much. And I'm like, should I have scaled? Was that my legacy? I could be doing more interviews now. I really struggle with that. And so I'm trying to tell myself, how many times can I look back and say that rejection was protection? And so I would love to hear from you guys. How was rejection protection for you in the past? And can you use that concept to help you manage something currently, emotionally, that feels like a loss? That's how I finally started to accept what was happening with Skylar. I finally started to say, okay, because I was saying, I'm never going to find anybody better than him, blah, blah, blah. And my sponsor, Rachel, was like, you don't know that. You could meet like a 50-year-old, 55-year-old, like multi-millionaire who, has a podcast network, I started to see it differently and think, well, maybe she's right. Maybe this is protecting me for something bigger. Hank Azaria on Dopey recently said, the Dopey podcast recently said, my God has 3 answers to requests. Yes, but not now. And no, because I'm giving you something better. And that has totally been true for me in the past. I had some great career opportunities too along the way that I blew. Fortunately, because I ended up at psychology, which was the best place ever, and I ended up owning it. And the other reason I love this idea of rejection being protection, and the idea that we can shift our perspective to that, is that if we can start to believe that rejection doesn't mean we're not valuable, right? I'm not rejected because of my value. Rejection isn't attached to my self-worth. So if some dude or some girl rejects you, can we say, it's not because I'm not thin enough. It's not because I'm not pretty enough. It's not because I'm not rich enough. it was protection. What a miraculous shift to be able to separate rejection from something's wrong with me. Like rejection is related to my worth, my value as a person, because then we'll also be more willing to take more chances on ourselves. So say I believe rejection is really protection. I'm willing to ask someone to be a guest on a show that's a huge guest, because if they say no, okay, it's not because my show is small. It's because something better is coming, or that person's about to get canceled and I was going to have them on my show, or you know what I mean? Whatever. Isn't that just a cool thing to think about? That rejection is protection, and getting kicked out of that little apartment was one of many rejections in my lifetime that were so good for me. Or even, I always struggled with this. I didn't make cheerleading in high school, and I was devastated. I wasn't kind of upset. I was on the floor upset. I really loved cheerleading. In the South, it's very competitive and athletic. It's based in gymnastics, and I really loved it. For many, many, many years, I've not understood that one. You know, why, man, I really wanted to do that. Like, I was good. It would have kept me fitter in high school. I gained weight in high school, which wasn't great for my self-esteem. If I could have cheered, that wouldn't have happened, all this stuff. In very recent years, I've come to see that because I didn't make cheerleading. My mom encouraged me to do debate, which I was horrified to do. I just thought it was the nerdiest thing ever. But I did it. And I was really good at debate. I won Best Speaker awards and went to debate camps at Michigan during the summers, which I know sounds nerdy, but I was really, really good at it. And I certainly believed I was intelligent back then. But after being such a good debater, it increased my confidence in my intellect and my speaking a ton. And I think one of the things that saved my ass later in recovery was a belief that I am intelligent. If nothing else, I'm smart, and I can do something on the other side of this. And I see a lot of other addicts, they don't feel that way, right? Especially you're talking getting into like your 30s and stuff like me. It's like, well, what am I going to do anyways? You know, I didn't get good grades in school. I didn't have any real dream, you know, blah, 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 blah. That idea that my intellect was not even questionable really was cemented in me during those debate years. And I held on to that later. I really held on to that. And it honed my verbal skills for a variety of things as I got older. I mean, I'm using it now, right? Talking to you guys. So can we shift our perspective, which is a miracle, to rejection is protection based on examples from my own life? And through that, raise the ceiling on my own expectations, raise the ceiling on my own beliefs about myself, because the rejection is not tied to my self-worth. Rejection is protection. It's not about me. It's for me. Let's try this. Let's apply for this promotion. Let's start my own podcast. Let's put the reel or the TikTok out that I want to put out. Let's start the business. Let's open the LLC. Isn't that cool? Thank you for sitting with me on this ride. Again, that is the one story I have never shared. World premiere exclusive today with you guys. And I really want to know situations for you where rejection was protection. ChasingHeroin@gmail.com. You can DM me on Instagram. Spotify does this cool thing where you can make comments now and allows me to publish them. Let me know. When was rejection protection for you? Did this resonate with you? And I checked in with Narcan Nate. He is more than willing to come back on and do an NDPE revisit. So I've got the one NDPE. I want 3 more, and we'll bring Nate to the in-person studio. We'll check in with him. We'll read those. And if you guys get a chance, write a review. Also, subscribe on YouTube if you don't mind. Even if you don't like do YouTube, if you just have a YouTube channel, which you probably do, if you just have like a YouTube account, which you probably do me a favor and follow Chasing Heroin. And I love you guys. We will be back next week with a fantastic new guest. And I hope that everybody is having a great spring 2024 so far. We'll talk to you later.